This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. From Microbe TV, this is TWiV, This Week in Virology, episode 1250, recorded on September 4th, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about viruses. Joining me today from New York, Daniel Griffin.
Hello, everyone.
Boy, you looks like you have a flower on your tie. What is that about, Daniel?
Oh, that's a good one. So it looks like a flower. There's like conidia, and there's all these septations.
Conidia, well, that's a fungal term.
Yes, that is a fungal term. So yes, this is my
Candida?
Aspergillus bow tie.
Aspergillus.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, usually I wear, it's like there's like an inside where you see more of the multicolors, but this I think goes well with the pocket square. I don't know if people can see it's sort of.
Yeah, I see that. So this is the organism that causes aspergillosis, right, which is a lung disease, correct?
Exactly. Yep, and can be invasive. Can be bad.
And
bad
where do you get
news.
this, in the southwest of the U.S. or
No, so that's cocci, right?
Okay.
So cocci is the desert fever, right? Aspergillus soil distributed throughout. We see it throughout the world, actually. There was quite a bit of aspergillosis, people getting all the steroids, right, during COVID, and sometimes people immunocompromised for other reasons.
So I think the ties can be a learning experience, you know?
So they are actually. It's gotten to I was in the ICU this morning, and the team is there, and we're talking, and it becomes a whole learning experience. You got the fungi, you got your molds, you got your yeast, you got your dimorphic, right? Just the bow tie is just a chance to talk about infectious disease pathogens.
Yeah, and then we have histoplasmosis, which is another fungal disease, right?
Yeah.
And this is also global, or is it in specific environments?
So histo is more global than I think people realize, right? There were these ideas of, histo, Ohio River Valley, but we see tons of it in the Caribbean. I think the lesson we've learned over the last few years is if you look for it, it is not just in those little pockets. The board questions still make believe they're in those little pockets, which I have to say, I think leads to a lot of missed and delayed diagnoses. I had a woman who got histo in France, and it took quite a while before we connected. She got diagnosed, she got treated, did great. I've seen cases in Africa, I've seen cases in India, really all throughout the world.
And so many people may carry these without symptoms, and then they get immunosuppressed, and it's a problem.
True. Yeah, there's usually something up why a person gets disseminated fungal diseases.
All right, then there's one more, Cryptococcus gattii.
Oh, yes, the number one AIDS-defining illness in sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay.
So, all right, we got a bunch there. We got blasto. We talk about we need a This Week in Fungus, but all right, let's jump in with a quotation, which is very much appropriate. I was being interviewed the other day, and the person says, "Hey, how are you doing?" And there was a pause before I said, "I'm doing all right." And he's like, "It was quite a pause there." I said, "Yeah, I wasn't really sure if you were really asking or if that was just the social nicety." But here's our quotation: "Human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe."
Why is this, Daniel? Why don't people understand that education is good? Did you hear what RFK Jr. said the other day? He said, expertise has no role in science or a democracy. How crazy is that?
Yeah, it really, it's craziness. It really, it's unfortunate. Yeah. All right, so let's start off with what is going on with COVID vaccines, right? And this is like such a fluid thing. I'm going to start with sort of the background, and then we'll get a little bit of updates on what's going on. So this article was published almost a week ago, right? How much changes in just a week? And so here we read this New York Times article. Because a CDC panel has not yet recommended the shots, COVID vaccines, the country's largest pharmacy chains are requiring prescriptions or holding back altogether under some state laws. CVS, Walgreens, the country's two largest pharmacy chains, are, for now, at the time this was published, clamping down on offering COVID vaccines in more than a dozen states, even to people who meet newly restricted criteria from the FDA. Thursday, when we recorded it, Amy Thibault, a spokeswoman for CVS, said the vaccine was not available at pharmacies in 16 states, citing the current regulatory environment and emphasizing that the list could change. Friday, so now we're about 6 days from, ago from this recording, CVS issued an update. It could administer vaccines in 13 of the 16 states. And in the District of Columbia, to people who had obtained a prescription from a doctor or other medical provider. When a New York Times reporter tried to schedule vaccine appointments in all 50 states, the Walgreens website said patients would need a prescription in 16 of them. The states where CVS is requiring a prescription are Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Utah, Virginia, West Virginia, along with the District of Columbia. And based on the Times' attempts to book appointments, Walgreens appears to require prescriptions in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Indiana, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, South Carolina, Utah, Virginia, Washington State, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. They said Washington State. Doesn't that upset you, Vincent?
Yeah, they don't need to say state.
The rest of it, we're fine with. But come on, don't say Washington.
I mean,
State.
they even say District of Columbia here. They don't even have Washington, D.C. in there, so there's no need for Washington State.
Yeah, you don't need to say Washington State. But some states are jumping in as we if you can get to this Denver Post article, Colorado issued an order to allow pharmacists to provide COVID vaccines without a prescription. Well, what's going on here? So there's this situation where by law in certain states, the pharmacists need the CDC basically to recommend the vaccines. Then they can give approved, licensed, recommended vaccines. Up until then, it requires a prescription from a doctor. So when's this going to happen? Well, the American Advisory, so the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, they are planning on meeting September 18th and 19th. An agenda has already been posted. But we're a bit worried, right? So Bill Cassidy, who's becoming quite famous, he's the senator who heads the committee, the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. He was instrumental, as we remember, in Kennedy's confirmation. He actually called for this ACIP meeting to be postponed, and I quote, "Serious allegations have been made about the meeting agenda, membership, and lack of scientific process being followed for the now announced September ACIP meeting. These decisions directly impact children's health, and the meeting should not occur until significant oversight has been conducted. If the meeting proceeds, any recommendations made should be rejected as lacking legitimacy, given the seriousness of the allegations and the current turmoil in the CDC leadership." This is actually before we read that Kennedy plans to add new members to this vaccine advisory panel. He plans to nominate 7 new advisors to this committee. We know the names of a few of the panel members: Catherine Stein, an epidemiology professor and tuberculosis researcher at Case Western. In 2022, she called for an end to vaccine mandates at universities and wrote that such rules were unethical. Dr. Stein did confirm that she expected to be named to the panel. Dr. Kirk Milhone, a cardiologist, we love them cardiologists, a member of the Independent Medical Alliance, which incorrectly claims that COVID vaccines have contributed to rising infant mortality, as well as to a 600% increase in heart problems among young men. Robert Malone, a current member of the panel and a vocal critic of mRNA vaccines, is an advisor to that alliance. John Gaetianis, a pediatric neurologist, has served for a number of years as an expert witness in a specialized federal vaccine court for families who believe they were harmed by vaccines.
Pediatric neurologist, eh?
Yep. Well, at least they're getting some people that are, they're not getting anyone with expertise in immunology or vaccines.
No, they got vaccine critics.
Yeah, that's basically what we got. And I think we got to talk about this. We're going to try to pull this together. Florida moves to end vaccine mandates for school children. And this is from an article in the New York Times by Patricia Mazzei, where we read Dr. Joseph A. Ladapo, How do we pronounce that?
I think
Ladapo?
it's Ladapo.
Ladapo? Well, okay. Florida Surgeon General made the announcement on Wednesday alongside Governor Ron DeSantis. Mr. DeSantis rose to national prominence during the coronavirus pandemic, and over his time, he has espoused increasingly anti-vaccine views. Here we go. Who am I to tell you what your child should put in their body? Dr. Ladapo, a vocal denigrator of vaccines, said to audience, to applause during an event on Wednesday in Valrico, Florida, near Tampa, your body is a gift from God. He added that the administration be working to end all vaccine mandates.
But Daniel, the Republican Party tells women what to do with their bodies. So how is this consistent with that?
Interesting, right? Yeah.
I mean, this is just total hypocrisy on his part. It's an ideological stance made to get votes. That's it. He's going to hurt kids, don't you think?
So I think that's the problem. And I think that's like, why does it matter? Why do vaccine mandates matter? And I have to say this was probably the bit of news this week that had me most upset. We live in a society, we live in a community, and it's one of those things like, hey, you're not allowed to like practice, shooting your handgun off in your backyard because boy, there's a neighbor and that bullet travels. And that's the issue with infectious diseases. Like if you get measles, you can spread it to your neighbor. If someone is under 1 year of age, and we've talked about this, like the first 6 to 8 months, you really can't protect a child with vaccination during that period of time. They're vulnerable because we try to vaccinate them early. If you say, I just want to protect my child, then that interferes with their ability to have lifelong protection. We also have a lot of individuals, and I do mean a lot. I mean millions of individuals, millions of fellow citizens who have immune issues. Maybe they're older, maybe they're on medicines, maybe there's something else. They can't get the immunity that protects them. They rely basically on the kindness of their friends, of their neighbors. And I see where this is headed, which is really like, this incredible individualism where people are no longer, worried about their communities, worrying about their neighbors. It's just, I want my personal freedom. And if it ends up killing you, if it ends up making you sick, I don't care. That's kind of crazy. That's the message I'm hearing.
We make people wear seatbelts to protect them. We make people go by the speed limit to protect them. Mm-hmm. There's some things that have to be mandated, and that's how public health works.
Yeah.
I mean, we mandate really that drugs. We mandate that certain drugs are illegal too, right?
Yeah.
And he's not asking us to overthrow those laws.
Yeah.
So it's totally inconsistent.
Well, it is inconsistent. I mean, look at this first sentence. Who am I to tell you what your child should put in their body? I mean, like, wait, now all drugs are legal. Like, your child can put, heroin or cocaine. Sure. I mean, no, that's not okay. We don't want to live in a society where
if you asked him that, he would say, oh, those are harmful. Well, vaccines are not harmful. They help you.
Yeah, incredibly safe. It's really the biggest, safest pharmaceutical intervention that we've ever, created.
Florida is being stupid and inhumane. There's no other way to look at it.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid, Daniel, that many other red states are going to follow suit.
I worry about this, right? I mean, what do you do as a mother of a small child, father of a small child, grandparents of a small child? Like, how do you keep your kids safe? Is this going to be like having a puppy? Like, I'm sorry, this child can't leave the backyard till like they're over a year old and can start getting the vaccines to protect them. I mean, what society are we headed towards?
Look, there will be parents who realize the value of getting their kids vaccinated, but there will be many who do not, right? There already are a lot who do not. And so that number will go up, and we will have more outbreaks of infectious diseases.
Yeah, more deaths, more hospitalizations, more children harmed. All right. Well, Legionella. I didn't get an update here as of August 29th. So let's look in real time, Vincent, and let's see if I've got an update since I checked earlier today. So I won't be able to see you for a moment as I put you behind my screen. And nope, still August 29th. It's all I got.
Seems to be over, eh?
Yeah, it hasn't been updated in, a little bit of time there. But Hopefully they'll keep updating this. But yeah, so we are, as of August 29th, 114 confirmed cases, 90 total hospitalizations, 7 deaths. I'm sort of hoping we're coming to the end here. And I basically sort of educated optimism is there's been all this mitigation. We think we've gotten rid of the source. You don't get Legionella from a person. There's no like sort of reproductive number where, one person gives it to so many others. This is you breathe in that contaminated water vapor, you get sick. We clean up that contaminated water vapor, you don't get sick. And as I said last time, and I'll modify it, in response to Jolene, bacteria don't make you sick. Dead bacteria don't make you sick. Now, the toxins that are left around, those can make you sick, but you're not actually getting sick from the dead bacteria.
I defended you, Daniel.
What's that?
I defended you when
you
Jolene
did.
Said,
And
well, I do think it's a correct statement because the dead, the toxin is a separate thing from the bacteria.
Yeah. Dead bacteria don't make you sick. Toxins do. All right. Bird flu. Oh my gosh. Bird flu. In the MMWR, we have highly pathogenic avian influenza A, H5N1 virus infection in a child with no known exposure, San Francisco, California, December 2024 - January 2025. So we read that on January 9th, it's taking a while before we get all this information, a case of highly pathogenic avian influenza A, H5N1 infection was identified in a school-aged child in San Francisco through enhanced surveillance. So what is that? So, a child tests positive for influenza A, and then we actually virus subtype, seeing like more than it's just influenza A. Is it this type of influenza A? And no source of exposure was identified, and investigations found no laboratory evidence of human-to-human transmission among close contacts. So what's the story? So here's the story. So this this index patient's illness began back December 13th, 2024. Signs and symptoms: fever, abdominal pain, myalgias, conjunctivitis, which lasted approximately 1 week and resulted in 2 healthcare visits on December 16 and 17. First visit was to a local emergency department where testing for influenza, respiratory syncytial virus, and COVID-19 were performed on a nasopharyngeal specimen. That day, an influenza A positive RT-PCR result was received, and the specimen was subsequently sent to the San Francisco Department of Public Health Laboratory for further testing and part of this enhanced surveillance. On January 9th, 2025, the original specimen tested positive for the influenza A H5 cycle threshold, CT value approximately 29. This was confirmed by the CDC using the same primer and probe set on January 14th. Second specimen, oral pharyngeal, was collected on January 10th, 25 days after the first specimen, was again positive. Now CT values up to 37, almost at that 38 cutoff. Specimens collected 4 days later were negative. Now, the index patient, this child, lived in an urban environment, did not travel, no reported exposure to dairy cows, cats, poultry, birds, or other wild animals in the 10 days prior to the illness onset. The family had a pet dog. There were no animals at school. The patient's family did not work in occupations that increased risk for the H5N1 virus. No handling, slaughtering, defeathering, butchering, culling, caring for, or milking infected animals. Okay. Now, a member of the patient's family purchased raw poultry at a live bird market 2 weeks before the child's illness onset. The poultry was cooked and consumed the same day it was purchased. I don't know if that had anything to do with what happened here. I suspect not.
The whole problem is this happened at the end of last year.
Yeah.
So I would say go check out that bird farm, but
yeah, it's
late.
Like a year ago. So
yeah.
All right, measles, more cases of measles. So we are up to, as of September 2nd, 2025, a total of 1,431 confirmed measles cases. Just to give a sense of who are these kids, and it is mostly kids. 28% are under 5, 38% are 5 to 19, about a third, so 34% are 20 or older, 92% are unvaccinated, 4% had 1 MMR dose, 2 had 4% had 2 MMR doses. And these are not kids who are just fine, like a Brady Bunch episode. 12% of the cases required hospitalization. And that's not for quarantine. That's because they were sick. They were struggling to breathe. All right. I didn't update our Canada, but we know things are still going strong up there. Should we look? Should we take a quick look at Canada?
Take a quick look. And in the meantime, so there's still cases being reported in the U.S., correct? But they're from a while ago, I presume?
Well, no, we still have ongoing measles. Like each week, there's more measles cases.
So why are some people claiming that the outbreak is over?
So I would say that if you look at Texas, like certain areas, okay, that outbreak has fizzled. Okay. But as far as the outbreak, as far as seeing ongoing cases of measles, let me just kind of compare. So from last time, so August 26th to our current update, we went from 1,408 up to 1,431. So we saw another couple dozen cases reported. They don't do it the way Canada does. So Canada basically says, hey, in this week 34, we saw 82 new measles cases. We're up to 4,799 measles cases. So I kind of like the way they do that, where they give you the actual, this is how many new cases. I sort of have to do the math in the US, which is okay. Don't mind doing the math. All right, flu. I did want to point out, we did have an update. Like we're still getting in. These are all like preliminary numbers. And as things get confirmed, they confirmed that there were 3 more influenza-associated pediatric deaths last season. So we're now up to a total of 278 children died from flu last season. That's a lot, 278. I know, what was that discussion like? Oh, only 278. Should we really get flu shots to protect 278 children from dying? Again, what country do we live in when people ask that question? All right. And we have the MMWR. This just came out, Prevention and Control of Seasonal Influenza with Vaccines, recommendations of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, United States, 2025-2026 influenza season, right? So we sort of covered this in real time, but here's the published report just in time for the fall. And this report updates the 2024-2025 recommendations of ACIP concerning the use of seasonal flu vaccines in the U.S. Routine annual flu vaccine is recommended for all persons aged 6 months and older who do not have a contraindication to vaccination. So pretty much very broad recommendation all the way across.
And it should be the same for COVID. I don't understand why it's not.
It should be because it's a political. Yeah, that's the only difference here. One is political. The data is compelling here for both interventions. Now, I wanted to jump in here, Vincent, because we often hear, and I think our listeners will be familiar with this. Why should I get the flu shot? I still got the flu. To which I kindly answer, but did you die? All right.
Yes.
So now I can add, but did you have a heart attack? And we've been talking about this connection for a while and how it motivates those big evil health insurance companies to encourage vaccination because they don't want to pay for you like in the hospital having your heart attack or your myocarditis. So we've got 3 articles I'm going to throw at you here. First article, risk of myocarditis or pericarditis with high dose versus standard dose influenza vaccine, a pre-specified secondary analysis of the randomized DanFlu 2 trial published in JAMA Network Open. So we knew as background that flu is a risk factor for developing myocarditis or pericarditis. So here we're looking at, can we reduce that even further with a high dose over just a standard dose vaccine? And that's exactly what they saw. When they looked at giving folks the high-dose vaccine relative to the standard dose inactivated influenza vaccine, the relative vaccine effectiveness was 45.71%. So second article, and this is very similar, right? So this is the same data, but a secondary analysis. So high dose versus standard dose flu vaccine and cardiovascular outcomes in older adults. This is a pre-specified secondary analysis of that DanFlu 2 randomized clinical trial. This is published in JAMA Cardiology. And so really what they're looking at here is, separate from myocarditis, pericarditis, what about the rate of cardiovascular events? And again, we see favoring the high-dose flu vaccine compared to standard dose. And again, the last article I'll throw at you, influenza vaccination to improve outcomes for patients with acute heart failure, PANDA-2, a multi-regional seasonal hospital-based cluster randomized control trial conducted in China, published in The Lancet. So here these investigators undertook a pragmatic multi-regional parallel group cluster or hospital randomized controlled superiority trial over 3 winter seasons in China. So pretty robust. Overall, we've got 7,771 participants enrolled at 164 hospitals each winter season from December 3rd, 2021 and February 14th, 2024, with 3,570 assigned to the influenza vaccination group, 4,201 to the control group. Primary outcome, a composite of all-cause mortality or any hospital readmission over 12 months. Primary outcome occurred in 1,378, so 41.2% of 3,341 patients in the vaccine group, and in 47% of the patients in the usual care. So we're getting an odds ratio of 0.83. So basically, we're seeing a 17% lower risk of this all-cause mortality or hospital readmission over 12 months. So basically what they did here, Vincent, is folks end up in the hospital, and they use that as an opportunity to vaccinate them. Mm-hmm. You're here. I'm giving you that flu vaccine. Let's see if you're less likely to die, if you're less likely to end up back in the hospital in the next 12 months, 17% reduction in that combined endpoint.
So these cardiovascular events after influenza, what's the etiology?
So we think it's an inflammatory. It's a post-infectious inflammatory phenomenon. Yeah, because we see it with several viral illnesses, right? You get your flu, you get better, and then it's sort of this 2 to 4 weeks later, you have an increased risk of having an MI or a stroke.
Same with COVID, right?
Yeah, clearly the same with COVID.
Because you have said many times people get discharged, and then within a year, 30% of them are dead.
It's really tough. Yeah. Yeah, I think we really underestimated the mortality with COVID by
also,
just looking at that 30-day. Yeah.
If you're hospitalized for COVID to begin with, that means you're having serious disease, right?
That is true. Yeah. All right. This one's a little disappointing, Vincent. So we're going to spend some time. We're now in the RSV section. And so this is the MMWR. Sort of glad this stuff's still coming out of the MMWR. We have the respiratory syncytial virus immunization coverage among infants through receipt of nirsevimab monoclonal antibody or maternal vaccination, United States, October 2023, March 2024. So it's basically last season, right? Last RSV season. We knew a couple things. We know that RSV is the most common reason why U.S. infants end up in the hospital, right? This is the major thing. And 2023, we get a long-acting monoclonal antibody for infants. We get nirsevimab. We've got a maternal vaccine recommended to prevent RSV among infants. So we were really all basically thinking this is going to be the end of RSV, right? We're going to all these kids, we're going to protect them. We're going to keep them out of the hospital. How well did we do? What was the uptake? What % of kids were protected? So here we get the answer. We have this cross-sectional analysis of data from the immunization information systems representing 33 states and the District of Columbia, and they found that, I'm going to insert, only 29% of infants born during this period were immunized against RSV, either through the nirsevimab or the RSV vaccination.
Why is it so low, Daniel?
So it's terrible, right? And it's very much state-specific. You have percent of infants immunized by state, and they've got this nice map where you can see it laid out. And it's really interesting, like who did a really good job, right? Alaska seemed to do a really good job. Minnesota, South Dakota, Maine. Kudos to Maine. I'm headed up there tomorrow. Who did not so great? I'm looking here at New York, and we're down in the 20s.
Look who's second to last. Florida.
Yeah, Florida and Nevada. Oh my gosh, what's going on? Mississippi, Oklahoma, all sort of down there in the very bottom.
Wouldn't it be up to the obstetrician to recommend nirsevimab or maternal vaccine, right?
So the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecology is recommending, right, that last trimester get that maternal vaccine, and then the pediatricians are trying to get the little kids with the nirsevimab in the first couple weeks of life.
So the lack of uptake is what is it? Because the doctors are not recommending it, or what?
So my hope was there was a supply issue, right? So there was a supply issue. Also, maybe there's some education. I think we'll know this year, right, when we sort of go forward. We've even had like lack of education, right, where we had that woman where the OB wouldn't give them the shot because they said, oh, it's too soon, you won't be able to get it, it's out of the season. We're like, no, that's the whole point is you get the shot. And then I think it was a pharmacy colleague of mine. And then they were saying like, no, they have it in the pharmacy. Should I go get it? It's available. And so lack of education, lack of supply issues. I'm hoping we do much better because really we don't need all these kids ending up in the hospital with RSV. And not only, oh my gosh, how traumatic for the child and the family, but also that's not great for a young set of lungs, young pair of lungs to end up in the hospital with severe respiratory distress, little kids sucking, trying to breathe.
Yeah. Well, we should point out that there are many states that didn't report, so maybe it would get a little better. I don't know.
Yeah, look, Texas didn't report, so maybe it's much better. We just didn't know.
Well, Texas, no, but I'm thinking of Oregon there.
Idaho.
Right? And also in the Northeast, a bunch of states didn't report.
Yeah, New Hampshire and Massachusetts. I hope they did better up there.
New Jersey, yeah.
All right. COVID, are you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're basically on the way up. We're up and we're on the way up. So this is this data from 8/23/25. So it came out like a day or two after we recorded last time, and you could see it in some parts of the country. It's really it's already up into the high area. When you're looking at the South, you're looking at the West. So yeah, all across the country. I put like this, and maybe this will be in the show notes. You can see kind of, over the last several years, over the last 3 years, kind of these fluctuations. And I'm hoping this is just a little bit of a shoulder, that maybe it'll come down. But I don't know. Maybe we're just going to go right into that winter peak. I'm going to predict a little bit of a hump, maybe a little bit of a pause, and then we get kind of our December, January spike.
Yeah, we have a couple of months till December, so I think you're right. I think it's going to go down. The question is how big a peak it will be this time.
Yep.
And I don't know, because last year it was as big as the winter peak. So
yeah. All right, but COVID is here, and so that brings up vaccine questions, right? Vaccine, transmission, how do I keep myself safe? Well, one of the things that we touched on just a moment ago was what happens when mom gets vaccinated? Could she somehow protect the baby? And we have the article, SARS-CoV-2 Vaccine Elicited Antibody Responses in Human Milk, published in JPEDS. Here they enrolled 13 participants prior to receiving SARS-CoV-2 immunization. They measured anti-SARS-CoV-2 spike IgG or IgA in serum and self-collected breast milk in participants over a 6-month period. Breast milk was processed by removing lipids and cellular debris by cold centrifugation, and skim milk was then filtered for binding antibody multiplexed assays and neutralization assays. I just enjoyed think of this as skim mother's milk, but they found that postpartum immunization with SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccine elicits a robust IgG response and moderate IgA response in serum, which is transferred to breast milk. Serum was able to neutralize pseudovirus after completion of the vaccine schedule, and those responses persisted for several months, predominantly in persons with a potential history of SARS-CoV-2 infections. Maybe some kind of a hybrid phenomenon going on there.
So all we know is that the antibodies are made and they're in the milk, but we don't know how protective they are of the baby, right?
I think what would be really challenging, right, is what you need to do. I mean, I guess there's several more things you could do. One is you could start, looking at babies who are getting this breast milk compared to babies that don't or not. Maybe you can even look at the levels of the antibodies that actually end up in the babies in different sites. So yeah, a lot of unanswered questions here. All right, we're going to spray stuff up our noses. The next two articles. I'm already getting questions. I even got questions from one of the Microbe TV hosts asking me about this stuff. So, the article, Interferon Alpha Nasal Spray Prophylaxis Reduces COVID-19 in Cancer Patients, a randomized double-blinded placebo-controlled trial published in CID, multi-center, randomized, double-blinded placebo-controlled trial where the patients are randomized 1-to-1. So half the folks are going to get daily 40,000 IU interferon alpha nasal spray. Half of the folks are going to get that saline placebo. Participants who developed flu-like symptoms self-collected nasal swabs for PCR testing for SARS-CoV-2, influenza, RSV, paraflu, adenovirus, seasonal coronavirus, coronavirus, human metapneumovirus, and/or SARS-CoV-2 rapid antigen testing. They had these co-primary endpoints, incidence of COVID-19 and/or other respiratory viruses, less than 90 days of randomization. I have to say, so they found that the incidence of COVID-19 was lower in the folks spraying the interferon alpha up their nose versus placebo, 8.3 versus 14.4. So a 40% reduced risk of infection. But the other respiratory viral infection incidence, no difference. What do you think is going on there, Vincent?
Yeah, it didn't make any sense, right? What are the viruses that they're looking at? Influenza.
So they're looking at flu.
Paraflu, adeno, picornas. Yeah, they're looking at a lot. It doesn't make any sense that they're
yeah,
not
I was like,
sensitive.
why?
No.
You know, I would expect a sort of a broad antiviral, right?
Yes.
Interferon. Yeah, interesting. Just COVID. So.
No, I mean, it's not a bad effect, but this is for cancer patients, right?
Yeah. So this is for cancer patients, but what about the rest of us? Because we all like spraying stuff up our noses, right?
Yeah, well, also, presumably they're vaccinated also, right?
Yep.
Curious. So this is a trial, so you can't go and buy spray interferon alpha yet, right?
So you can't, but what you can potentially spray up your nose is acilastine nasal spray for prevention of SARS-CoV-2 infections, a phase 2 randomized clinical trial published in JAMA Internal Medicine. So people are already emailing me, is this ready for prime time? Can you send me a prescription? So here we've got a phase 2 double-blind placebo-controlled single center trial conducted from March 2023 to July 2024. Healthy adults from the general population were enrolled at the Saarland University Hospital in Germany. That's like right on that sort of border of Germany and France, the Saarland. Participants were randomly assigned 1-to-1 to receive acilastine, 0.1% nasal spray, or placebo. And they're going to do this 3 times a day for 56 days, for like 2 months. And they're going to do SARS-CoV-2 rapid antigen testing twice weekly with positive results confirmed by PCR. Symptomatic participants with a negative RAT underwent multiplex PCR testing for respiratory viruses. And the primary endpoint was the number of PCR-confirmed SARS-CoV-2 infections during the study. All right, so we're going to end up with 450 participants randomized, sort of split half and half, 227 get the acilastine, 223 get placebo. In the intention to treat population, the incidence of PCR-confirmed SARS-CoV-2 infection was significantly lower, 2.2% versus 6.7%. So basically about a 70% reduction.
Yeah, but Daniel, these numbers are tiny.
Yeah, I guess that's the problem. We're talking about
N equals 5 and N equals 15.
15, yeah.
I don't think you should run out and get acilastine yet.
I mean, so that's kind of an like number needed to treat, right? So look at that. Like you have to prevent 10 infections, right? You have to treat 200 people. Yeah. So it becomes this for every 20 people. And what we don't really know, right? So we've got this reduction in the overall number of PCR confirmed symptomatic infections. We also have a lower incidence of PCR-confirmed rhinovirus infections, right? 1.8 versus 6.3. But again, you can do the numbers. You can figure out we're talking about 4 versus, 14. again. And remember, you're spraying this up your nose. You're doing it 3 times a day. You're doing it for 2 months, and you're going to prevent a few cases.
So what is this, an allergy medicine?
Yeah, it's an antihistamine that you spray up your nose.
Do you know, someone asked me if eye drops, because it's also sold as an eye drop formulation. Do you know if that would work?
You know, I would not necessarily think so, just sort of thinking about potential mechanisms, right? Because I don't really think of SARS-CoV-2 or, you know, coming in through your eyeballs.
Yeah, but
Really?
you could imagine it dripping into your throat.
Yeah.
Right? But maybe less effective. It's already not so great, right?
Yep. Yeah. I don't think I'm not really sure it's prime time. I'm not really sure it's time to start
I
writing
do
everyone's
think
scripts.
Now's the season they should do a bigger trial, right?
Now's a great time to do a bigger trial. Yep. All right.
But on the other hand, since it is an approved drug, and you could be using it off label, right?
Yeah. I mean, it could be done off label. I'm just saying, like, is this compelling enough data for people to jump in and start doing it off label?
I think if you just get vaccinated and are ready with Paxlovid, that's better, really.
Yep.
But what do I know? I'm not a doctor.
All right, COVID early viral phase. So you went ahead. It is the season. The numbers are rising. You test positive. So let's spend a little time and go through this slowly, so people appreciate what this study actually is showing us, is telling us. So this is the article. It's about metformin. So everyone's going to get emotional. So take a deep breath. We're going to go through this. Effect of metformin on the risk of post-coronavirus disease 2019 condition, so post-COVID, among individuals with overweight or obese, a population-based retrospective cohort study. So interesting wording, with overweight or obese. Okay.
Should be obesity, right?
Yeah, I would say with, obesity or who are overweight. I don't know. Maybe
it's weird.
Yeah, it's weirdly worded. But so, okay, little background first. The UK's National Institute for Health and Care Excellence defines post-COVID condition, PCC, as symptoms persisting for at least 4 weeks after acute COVID, whereas the WHO defines it as lasting at least 2 months, usually beginning 3 months post-infection. All right, so sort of think about how they're doing that. The outcome PCC here was defined as having a PCC, post-COVID condition diagnostic code, and they're using like SNOMED CT or the ICD-10. And this is at least one of the 25 WHO-listed symptoms during visits to a GP 90 to 365 days after the COVID-19 diagnosis, with no history of that symptom 180 days before the SARS-CoV-2 infection. And we've got a list here, abdominal pain, allergy, altered smell, anxiety, brain fog, blurred vision, cough, dizziness, big long list. So what did they find? Now, in this population-based cohort study, they used the Clinical Practice Research Data Link, ORM. So this is a UK primary care database. It actually represents like about a quarter of the population of England. So it's a pretty big retrospective cohort study that they're doing here. And they're using this target trial emulation to compare the effect of metformin versus no metformin on developing post-COVID conditions in folks who are overweight or obese. They're going to do some subgroup analyses. There's going to be a number of important exclusions. So those with less than 1 year of GP history, those that had been on metformin or other glucose-lowering drugs within 1 year before they got COVID, people that got treated with Paxlovid. So a total of 766,859 overweight or obese patients with a record of SARS-CoV detection were identified from the database during the study period. Of those, 624,308 met the eligibility criteria, were included in the analysis. There were 2,976 patient-initiated metformin within 3 months after COVID-19 diagnosis in the study. The 1 year risk difference for post-COVID conditions was 12.58%, so a negative 12.58%. And then they have this nice figure where you can actually see the separation, folks that metformin, not metformin. So let's just a little bit of detail here. So we read in the discussion that in this study, using a target trial emulation framework, they found that individuals with overweight or obesity who initiated metformin within 3 months after a COVID-19 diagnosis had a lower 1-year risk of post-COVID conditions compared to those who did not. So that's really interesting. This is different than that COVID out trial where people are like acutely being started on metformin. A lot of these folks were just ended up getting started on metformin, within the 3 months after that diagnosis. Now, they say some studies have suggested that antivirals such as nirmatrelvir, ritonavir, molnupiravir, and remdesivir taken during the acute infection period may reduce the risk of select post-COVID conditions. However, as they point out, those antivirals are not widely used in the UK.
So the magnitude of the effect of metformin, does it compare to nirmatrelvir, for example?
It doesn't look like it. So it's, again, it's always this challenge of how do you define post-COVID conditions, right? So here they're using a number of these symptom-based ones, right? Memory issues, intermittent fever, headache, joint pain. And we've talked about when you start using, I'm going to say, harder criteria like having a stroke, having a heart attack, a new diagnosis of diabetes, then you clearly see this more significant impact of the antivirals.
Why do they choose an obese population? Are they more at risk for PCC?
So they are. Yeah. I think what it was they figured this is a population that might just end up on metformin for diabetes or pre-diabetes because they're not specifically putting them on to prevent post-COVID. So it's more of sort of an observational.
So if you had a patient who was obese and had just recovered from COVID, what would you do?
So I don't think at this point, the indication is, let's get you on metformin. But if the person's obese, if they're pre-diabetic, I mean, as we're sort of seeing here, a lot of these folks ended on metformin, not specifically to treat post-COVID conditions, but for those other.
But the use of nirmatrelvir to prevent long COVID, that's when it's used as an antiviral during the infection, right?
Correct. During that first week. It's really a shame. As they point out, antivirals are not widely used in the United Kingdom. And again, that's a national health system. Let's save money.
Yeah. I mean, I find that objectionable to look for something else when you have something that works already, right?
Yeah. Let's find something cheap, Yeah, it may not be as effective, but it's cheap, and we don't want to, we're not. And that's what it takes. People sometimes complain. Well, people often complain. In the U.S., we spend way too much money on healthcare. Do we? Is your healthcare, is your health, is your well-being, worth less than what should we be as a country spending our money on?
No, health insurance companies, undoubtedly, Jay.
They want your money. All right. So what do we recommend during that acute phase? What are the recommendations still? Number 1, Paxlovid, remdesivir, molnupiravir, convalescent plasma in some contexts. And if people progress, and we're starting to see that second week where folks might end up in the hospital, hypoxic, steroids, anticoagulation, pulmonary support, maybe still a role of remdesivir or immune modulation. And I'm going to wrap us up here. Sort of nice. I got a alert from Open Forum that the article Post-Acute Sequelae of COVID, Pasco Long COVID, an evidence-based approach. I don't know if that should be evidenced or evidence-based, but evidenced. It actually is among the most read recent articles in Open Forum Infectious Disease with 14,585 views.
Congratulations.
Well, I'm glad that it's out there. I'm glad people are looking at it. I hope it's a resource that is helping clinicians and patients. But I will wrap us up, as I've been saying. As we've been saying, no one is safe until everyone is safe. I'm hoping everyone pause the recording right here, go to parasiteswithoutborders.com and click donate. I got a number of donations today. Thank you. Really, I mean, that's what keeps us going. You're all part of this. Be part of this. Every small amount, every large amount. This is how we continue to do the work that I think is more important than ever. August, September, October, we're doing our American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene fundraiser. Again, doubling your donations, hoping to send a maximum donation of $20,000 to ASTM&H, and looking forward to the ASTM&H annual meeting coming up in a few months.
It is time for your questions for Daniel. You can send them to daniel@microbe.tv. Ann writes, can you please address Moderna Spikevax versus next spike? Which should I order to administer to my patients? I'm an internist geriatrician with many 65 years and older patients. You indicated waiting 6 months after a COVID infection to get vaccinated. I used 3 months before. What about 4 months?
Okay. So we got a lot here. So let's start off. Let's compare Spikevax to the next spike, or what Moderna would like to market as the next generation vaccine. I'll tell you what we know. So, right, they're both mRNA vaccines, but they're a little different. What is in the mRNA? So the original Spikevax codes for the full length protein, the full length spike of the SARS-CoV-2. It's got that proline modification. Now, the next spike only codes for two specific and what they'll suggest are highly targeted sections of the spike protein. Next thing is the dose. There's a little bit difference as far as the amount of mRNA. So we've got 50 micrograms versus 10. So it's 1/5. There's this idea that maybe we're going to end up with a little less as far as side effects. Now, this is going to become the issue. So is one better? What about efficacy? So there was a study done where they actually suggested that the relative vaccine efficacy of the next generation. And what was the vaccine efficacy? It was a per protocol, I believe it was symptomatic COVID, right? Which is interesting. We're going to talk about this in a section. So they're going to suggest it's a little bit better at preventing you from getting symptomatic COVID. Approved for the FDA. Now, maybe the last part, just as as you mentioned here, so you're actually saying I'm going to order this, right? So you're going to order it. You might give it to your patients. There's actually a little bit of an issue with how you take care of this. So remember that the original vaccines, right? They had to be frozen, and then if you did thaw them in the refrigerator, you had to use them within a period of time. That's now 60 days. The new next spike, next generation one, this can actually have a shelf life of like 90 days, I think is what they say. So, yep. So that's the first part. So there are some differences. I'm a little curious, actually. I would love to see endpoints, not just symptomatic COVID, but serious disease, right? Because, with less of that spike, you're going to end up, I think, with less T-cell epitopes. So I'm not sure what the durability and long lasting. I appreciate that, okay, maybe somehow they're getting a higher antibody and maybe they're going to get less symptomatic COVID. Any thoughts on that, Vincent, before I jump to the second part?
Nope, that's all good. That's
Okay.
great.
The next is, 3 months. 3 months is fine. I mean, you've had COVID, wait 3 months, and I think it's fine. Now, the 6 months between doses is what has been the recommendation for folks 65 and over.
Okay, Lori writes, good day, good people. So, confusing times. I just had to order a COVID vaccine from a pharmacy for the first time ever. My patients, both teens, couldn't get it without a prescription. We don't have it yet. Well, that's the new guidelines, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
And also new folks can now order flu mist via the internet and get it delivered to their homes. In anticipation of all the questions we might get, I wanted to write a response that we could send to folks. I was surprised to see that egg allergy was a contraindication, and I'm a little surprised that we are still talking about this. The CDC says people with egg allergy can get any vaccine, beginning with 2023-24 season. Additional safety measures no longer recommended. Don't need it if you have doesn't matter what kind of allergic response you had to eggs, you can still get a flu vaccine. But the package insert says can't give it to people who've had reactions to the vaccine, including egg protein. And then the Flu Mist website also says that. So what should we tell folks? My office manager thinks we should default to the package insert. I am not so sure. Thank you, as always. And do you ever take a week off? I love hearing from you all each week, but I do worry a little. I am a pediatrician after all. But we're not young, Lori.
Yeah, I guess we don't need time off because we're going to die soon. But try to get it in before. Eggs. It's not an issue.
No.
Update the package insert. Yeah, I mean the science is the science. This egg allergy business, it's not a thing. So yeah, you do not need to worry about it, and you don't need to spread misinformation, right? Let's default to something that's not true. No, let's default to the truth. Don't worry about the eggs.
All right, Owen writes, in the early days of COVID, we heard a lot of talk and even studies estimates about how much spread was coming from asymptomatic people. As the virus has changed over the years, is there any reason to believe that less people are becoming infected and are still asymptomatic? I'm a high-risk person, and the idea of testing people I might share time with is not a reality. It would be much easier for me if positive infections would always include symptoms.
Sorry, Owen. This is the world we're living in. Yeah, there's still asymptomatic transmission.
I looked it up. It's about 40% still.
Yeah.
Lisa writes, I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner, and this is just a comment, and it's absolutely soul-crushing to work in a state with such a batshit crazy state surgeon general and governor at the helm. Sadly, people will die, children will die, the folks making these decisions will have blood on their hands. Thank you for all you do and continue to speak out. Lisa is from Venice, Florida. I just thought you'd like to hear that, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
Mark writes, I have experienced the early stages of the pandemic through input and insight from TWiV, Baylor, CIDRAP. I still find lots of information on TWiV. Really appreciate the courage. Daniel's clinical updates, Puscast, office hours are my absolute favorite ways to consume contemporary science and data. I even have a microbe TV sticker on my truck and camper. Good. All right, my question. I'm a 41-year-old male with a history of AFib with RVR. I'm post-ablation, well-controlled without any pharmaceuticals, and any AFib experience I experience now is brief and episodic. I've not been vaccinated, and I'm COVID naive. My employer is mounting a return to office initiative, which is surely going to expose me to SARS-CoV-2. I'd like to get vaccinated since living like a hermit and working from home are soon coming to an end. I wasn't able to find any up-to-date dose administration information on Nuva-Vaxovid's 2025 formulation as a primary series in unvaccinated people. Are the shots still 4 months apart, one and done until the next wave? Let me know your thoughts.
Yes, this is kind of, you're sort of unique there, I guess, at this point. So, what would I recommend? So, if you've never had it before, the whole idea that, just get one shot of the Novavax as kind of a yearly booster, it doesn't make as much sense, right? It's still the same immunology, right? The idea of you get an initial shot, let's say 3 months later, you get a boost, so sort of a prime boost phenomenon. I still think that makes sense. Going to be a little tricky to navigate in current times, but yeah, that would be the science.
Mark writes, my 65-year-old spouse was recently prescribed Simponi Aria, an immune response suppressing TNF inhibitor for psoriatic arthritis. She developed a mild cough that she thought was from allergy to ragweed. Turns out it was COVID, and she had a Simponi infusion while she had COVID. This is her fourth bout of COVID, and she's had multiple COVID-19 vaccinations. She was started on Paxlovid and is doing well, so we're not worried. Interestingly, there is low-level evidence that people on immune inhibitors like Simponi are actually at decreased risk for developing severe COVID-19 disease because these drugs suppress any cytokine storm that might occur in the second week. What has been your experience with patients on biologics like Simponi who get COVID?
Yeah, no. So everything you're saying here is on mark. It looks like the TNF inhibition may actually help with reducing the risk of that inflammatory cytokine storm. And that's the big thing. That's what gets our patients into trouble. Usually not that first week. It's not the viral replication. It's that inflammatory cytokine storm. So, yep, everything you're saying here makes sense.
And Nancy writes, Dr. Griffin, should I be getting a COVID vaccine today with what I am reading in the news? I am 65 years old. And Nancy appropriately comes from Chagrin Falls.
Did you rename that? I love the name of the town. It's interesting, Nancy. So we're right about the time. We're in the fall. Usually we're sort of trying to predict when the peak is going to be, when people should get vaccinated, because there's this waning. There's this sort of similar effect with COVID vaccines we see with flu vaccines, where you get your shot, sort of reach a maximum protective period, and then it wanes over time as those antibodies contract, and the vaccination is not as proximal to when you might get exposed. We're usually talking about October, but as we point out, we're kind of heading into a wave now. So the timing is always a little bit tricky here.
That's TWiV Weekly Clinical Update with Dr. Daniel Griffin. Thank you, Daniel.
Oh, thank you. And everyone be safe.